When my father told me I'd go to my sister's wedding, or he'd stop paying for my education, I didn't argue. I just smiled because there was nothing left for him to pay for. For years, that one semester was his favorite weapon, but that day I turned it into my freedom. And once you pay your debt to control, there's nothing left to fear. My father's voice didn't come through the phone. It marched through it, the same way it had marched through every corner of my childhood. You're going to that wedding whether you like it or not, Mara. Miss it, and I'm done paying for your education. He said it like an order, not a sentence. The same tone he used when he told me to fix someone else's mistake, when he believed obedience was proof of love. Sharp, final, certain I'd fall in line. I sat alone in my small apartment in Seattle, the last orange light of day slicing through the blinds. On my desk lay the letter no one knew about, my acceptance into a graduate program in sustainable design, my achievement, my freedom. I ran my thumb along the embossed seal, feeling the weight of everything I'd earned without him. "Dad," I said, steady but careful, "I have finals that week." It was a lie. I'd already graduated, top of my class, with a job offer from one of the most respected firms in the city. But he didn't know that. He hadn't asked, because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped offering pieces of myself to people who treated them like footnotes. "Finals can wait," he snapped. "Family doesn't." He still thought the first semester he'd paid for meant he owned my future. I almost smiled. The rest I'd built from the ground up, nights in the lab, weekends tutoring, scholarships I fought tooth and nail to win. So I let him talk. He mistook silence for surrender, as he always did. "You'll be there," he said finally, "in a dress, with a smile. Or you can forget about me helping you ever again." When he hung up, the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It hummed, alive, electric, like the world holding its breath before something breaks. I looked around my little home, the chipped mugs, the worn-out couch, the textbooks with dog-eared corners. Every bit of it, mine, earned, untouched by him. For the first time, I realized he couldn't threaten what he didn't own. That was the night I understood. His control had an expiration date, and I was the one holding the clock. The night I scrolled through the family group chat, I realized I'd been written out of their story long before I ever stopped speaking. Photo after photo, my mother's perfect angles, my sister Leah draped in white lace, every caption soaked in admiration. The word love scattered like confetti. Not once in hundreds of messages had anyone thought to ask how I was doing. The realization didn't crash into me, it settled, like dust finally choosing a place. To rest after years of chaos. They could keep their flawless daughter, their glossy day, their carefully framed version of love. I had my own life now, and I was 2 days away from owning my freedom. The next morning, I brewed coffee and watched the city stretch awake. Lights spilling between buildings, the world moving without demanding anything from me. For the first time in years, silence didn't ache, it breathed. On the table, 2 envelopes waited. One that opened the door to my graduate program in sustainable design, and one that promised my first job at Ardent Systems. Proof that I'd built a life from nothing but long nights and stubborn hope. 4 years of work, of equations and exhaustion, of choosing myself when no one else did, and not a single person in my family knew. I'd stopped offering parts of my story to people who never cared to read it. When I told my best friend Kara, she said, "They don't get to be proud of a story they never read." And she was right. Growing up, I'd learned to read the language of silence, the way my parents saved their praise for Leah, polishing her like a trophy, while I stayed in the background, steady and unseen. I used to think invisibility was proof that I didn't matter. But now I understood, invisibility was my escape route. That truth didn't arrive with fireworks, just a quiet, clean certainty. I took another sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and turned the job offer over in my hands. 6 figures, benefits, stability, everything I'd earned, every piece mine. The only thing left tethering me to them was that one semester of tuition, their favorite weapon, the leash they pretended was love. I opened the drawer and pulled out the cashier's check I'd been saving. $12,350, every cent repaid, every chain broken. It wasn't money, it was freedom, sealed in an envelope. I ran my finger along the edge of the paper, feeling something shift inside me. A thought that landed soft and final. This is the last thing they'll ever hold over me. Outside, the wind brushed against the window, stirring the air like an omen. 2 days from now, they'd all gather under fairy lights and white roses, telling the same stories, laughing the same careful laughs. They wouldn't notice my absence, not until they had to explain it. And when that moment came, I wanted them to finally see what they'd lost. Not the quiet daughter they forgot to love, but the woman who stopped asking for permission to exist. The night before the wedding, freedom sat in front of me, folded into a plain white envelope that could end 4 years of control with one quiet gesture. I sat at my small kitchen table, the envelope resting between my hands like a promise. It was strange how something so thin could carry the weight of an entire lifetime. $12,350, the exact cost of their control, finally paid in full. I'd built that sum piece by piece, one night shift, one tutoring session, one skipped meal at a time. Every dollar I didn't spend on comfort became a brick in the wall between us. I wasn't buying peace, I was building it. It had never been about the money. It was about closure, the final thread I needed, to cut so they could no longer pull me back with guilt disguised as generosity. I sealed the envelope carefully and wrote my father's name across the front in even, deliberate strokes. The letters looked formal, distant, perfect. The next morning I packed light, my purse, the envelope, and a navy blue dress. The kind that doesn't beg to be noticed, but refuses to disappear. I hung it by the door like armor waiting for battle. As I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, I froze. I looked, calm, not brave, not angry, just still. It startled me, that steadiness, the kind of peace that only arrives after a storm you didn't know you'd survived. I sat on the couch, the morning light spilling across the floor, and whispered the words aloud just once, to no one. I'm going to be free of them. No witnesses, no applause, just truth finding its voice. That night I dreamed of water, a river pressing against an old dam, silent at first, then breaking through. When I woke, my pillow was damp. I didn't care if it was sweat or tears. Either way, something had finally let go. The next day would be Leah's wedding, the performance they'd been rehearsing for years, the family portrait I no longer belonged in. And before the first song played or the first glass clinked, I'd hand him that envelope and walk away for good. Morning came wrapped in gray stillness, the kind that feels like the world holding its breath. The air smelled like rain that hadn't decided yet. I dressed slowly, the navy dress, the simple flats, a silver bracelet I'd bought for myself last Christmas. No drama, No statement, just me finally stepping into my own life. By the time the clouds began to move, so had I. The decision was made. This wouldn't be a confrontation, it would be a release. The moment I stopped being their daughter and started being my own person. The wedding looked like a fairy tale, the kind built for people who never had to earn their own happy ending. The garden estate glittered under soft string lights, rows of white roses lined like obedient soldiers. On either side of the walkway, every corner smelled of money and performance. I parked a few spaces away from the main entrance and sat in silence, counting my breaths until the tremor in my hands turned into resolve. When I finally stepped out, I carried only my purse and the envelope that would end everything. Guests floated between tables, sipping champagne and laughing in that careful way rich families do when they know they're being watched. The air was too sweet, the smiles too rehearsed. I spotted my parents near the floral arch, my mother radiant in her curated perfection, my father basking beside her like a man rehearsing pride. For Leah, they glowed. For me, they never even flickered. My father saw me first. His smile fell like glass breaking. "You're late," he said, voice flat and public. "Traffic," I replied. My tone was steady, detached, like someone watching a film they'd already seen. My mother's eyes swept over me, sharp and assessing. "Oh, Mara," she sighed, "that's what you're wearing?" "It's clean," I said simply. "It's plain," she corrected, slicing through the air. "Plain works for me." My father gestured toward a cluster of relatives gathering for photos. "Let's go," he ordered. But I didn't move. Instead, I reached into my purse and held out the envelope. He frowned, irritation creasing his face. "What's this?" "Open it." He tore it open with the impatience of a man who'd never been told no. His eyes scanned the check, and the shift was instant, pride collapsing into something smaller, meaner. "What is this supposed to be?" "It's repayment," I said quietly. "For the first semester of college you paid for. Every dollar, every cent." My mother's voice wavered between panic and disbelief. "Mara, that's ridiculous." "No," I cut in, calm as stone. "What's ridiculous is using that money as a leash. You can stop now. You don't own any part of me anymore." He stared at me, uncomprehending, like someone hearing a language they refused to learn. "Leverage," I said softly. "That's what it's always been. One semester you paid for, and 4 years you used it to control me." My father's voice dropped low, cold and commanding. "This is not the time or the place." "I think it's exactly the time," I said, "because it's the last time." A hush rippled through the nearby guests, curious eyes hidden behind polite smiles. My mother reached for me, panic cracking her perfect composure. "Mara, please, don't do this here. It's your sister's." "This isn't about her," I said. "It never was." I took a single step back, the gravel crunching under my heels. I didn't come to celebrate. I came to return what was never a gift, just a chain. "You can keep it. I'm done." The silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the daughter being controlled. I was the woman walking away, and I didn't owe them a single word. The word no didn't explode out of me. It landed soft and steady, like a door finally closing, after years of letting the wind in. My father's face burned crimson. "Get back here right now," he barked, his voice slicing through the murmurs of curious guests. For a split second, the old reflex kicked in, that familiar urge to obey, to shrink, to keep the peace at any cost, But this time it died before it reached my throat. "No," I said, "just that. No explanation, no apology, just the clean edge of truth." The wind caught my dress as I walked away, their voices breaking behind me. Relief hit harder than regret. Quiet, clean, final. I sat behind the wheel, my hands shaking until they didn't. The roses swayed in the garden's breeze, and from somewhere distant came the first notes of a violin, the wedding march beginning without me. I turned the key. The engine hummed to life. I didn't stay to hear the vows. Leaving didn't feel like running anymore. It felt like returning, not to them, but to myself. That night, my phone lit up over and over, buzzing across the counter with missed calls, unread messages, and guilt dressed as love. I let it ring. The apartment met me with silence, that strange, buzzing kind that used to make me uneasy. I brewed chamomile tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights ripple across the water. For the first time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt earned. By the second day, the calls slowed. By the third, they stopped. What came next wasn't loneliness, it was space. The kind of space that makes room for peace to grow. I filled it with work, early mornings, long days at Ardent Systems. The office buzzed with ideas, numbers, and blueprints. A world where effort mattered more than appearances. My supervisor, Greta, looked over my report one afternoon and said, "You've got a good head, and you listen." I smiled because she was right. Listening had been my armor for years. Now it was my skill. Evenings were quiet again. Dinner for one, a book, the hum of the fridge. I learned that peace can feel unfamiliar at first, like shoes that fit but haven't softened yet. Every few days, a thought tried to sneak in. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe I should have smiled through it one more time. But then I'd hear his voice echoing, "Get back here right now." And I'd remember mine. No. The silence wasn't exile. It was recovery. Sunday came gentle and gray. I bought myself flowers, small, yellow, alive. I set them on the kitchen table beside my notes and a half-finished cup of coffee. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And that was enough. Freedom didn't roar. It whispered. And I finally knew how to listen. Every time I breathe in, that's silenced now, I remember the moment I walked away, and how peace never asked me to explain myself. 5 days after the wedding, peace knocked on my door wearing guilt and designer jeans. Through the peephole, I expected a delivery. Instead, I saw Leah. Her hair was perfect. Her mascara wasn't. She looked like someone whose world had cracked, but only just enough to show a glimpse of the truth beneath the gloss. When I opened the door, she stepped in without waiting for permission. The faint scent of her perfume replacing the smell of coffee and solitude. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice tight, like she'd been holding her breath for days. "How'd you get my address?" "Mom gave it to me," she said, already scanning the small apartment. The chipped mug on the counter, the stack of books on the floor, the single yellow flower wilting on the table. Her gaze lingered like she didn't know how to exist in a space that wasn't curated. "It's nice," she said finally. Not kind, not cruel, just distant. "What do you want, Leah?" Her eyes glistened. "I want to know why you ruined my wedding." The words hit like cold water. Not sharp, just shocking. "I didn't ruin it," I said. "I left before it started." "That's the point," she said, her composure cracking. Mom cried. Dad was furious. Everyone was whispering. "You made us look human," I cut in softly. "I'm sorry my absence embarrassed you, but I wasn't going to stand there pretending everything was perfect." Her lip trembled. Why would you give Dad that check? Why would you do that? Because I'm tired, I said quietly. Tired of being the background in a story I helped build. Tired of being useful, but never visible. She blinked, the denial in her eyes slipping into confusion. That's not true. It is, I said. When's the last time you asked what I wanted? What I was studying, how I was doing. Silence. I graduated 3 weeks ago, I continued. Top of my class. Valedictorian. I gave a speech. Nobody came. Nobody even knew. Her mouth parted. No sound came out. I didn't tell anyone, I said, because I knew no one would care. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, her polished confidence crumbling at the edges. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't. I believe you, I said. You lived in the world they built, the one where love is conditional, and I only mattered when I was convenient. She looked up, tears gathering. What do I do with that now? Start by listening, I said. Not to fix it, just to hear it. So I told her about the new job, the projects I was leading, the quiet joy of building something real. She listened, really listened, and the air between us finally stopped bracing for impact. When I finished, she wiped her eyes. That's incredible, she said softly. I'm proud of you, Mara. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. At the door, she hesitated, hand on the frame. Are you ever going to talk to Mom and Dad again? I don't know, I said honestly, maybe someday. But not now. She nodded, eyes red, voice fragile but sincere. If you ever need me, I'll answer this time. For years, I'd been shouting into silence. Now, for the first time, someone heard me. Forgiveness didn't arrive in grand gestures. It came in moments like this, quiet, trembling, and real enough to start something new. When Leah left, the silence she left behind didn't ache. It exhaled. For the first time, the past didn't pull. It just settled. I leaned against the door after she was gone, feeling years of exhaustion bleed out of me, until all that was left was stillness. Not anger, not resentment, just release. A week later, I was hunched over design notes for a new filtration model when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made me pause. Evan, Leah's new husband, the last person I expected to hear from. Hey, Mara, he began, cautious, hesitant. Sorry for calling out of nowhere. Do you have a moment? Curiosity edged out caution. Go ahead. He cleared his throat. It's about your parents. Something's not right. My pen froze above the blueprint. Go on. He exhaled. A few months ago, your dad asked me for a loan. 20,000. Said it was temporary, just a rough patch with the business. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. And you gave it to him? I did, he admitted. But now he's asking again. 15,000 this time. Says the company's collapsing, that they might lose the house. The irony landed like déjà vu. The same man who once called me ungrateful was now begging his daughter's in-laws for money. So, Evan continued, uncertain, Leah's confused. She said your parents supported both of you for years. If that's true, how could they be broke? A soft laugh escaped me. Not cruel, just weary. They didn't support me. They paid for 1 semester of college. I paid for the rest, every dollar. I even paid them back last week. He was silent long enough for truth to find its mark. She doesn't know that. Of course she doesn't, I said. They've been selling a story, the generous parents, the perfect family. But all they ever built was an illusion, he sighed. I thought they were doing okay. I guess I was wrong. They've always been better at image than honesty, I said softly. You're just close enough now to see the cracks. He hesitated. Should I tell her? She deserves to know, I said, but don't force it. Let her see it on her own. It's the only way it'll stick. When the call ended, I stared at the blueprints. Clean lines, quiet logic. For years, I thought I was the only one trapped under their shadow. Turns out, even the golden one had been living in borrowed light. By Wednesday, the phone rang again. Mom. For a second, I almost let it ring, but silence isn't always strength, I answered. Her voice was thin, frayed at the edges. Mara, it's your father. He's in the hospital. Heart attack. The words didn't stab, they settled. Heavy, final. Is he stable? He's okay, she rushed. The doctors say rest, less stress. But the business, he can't handle it. He needs help. There it was, the ask, bare, unwrapped. What kind of help? You could manage the accounts just until he's better. You've always been good with numbers. I can't, Mom. I have my own job. This is family, Mara, she snapped, the word still a weapon. I exhaled. Family works both ways. You can't disappear until you need saving. A beat, then brittle. So that's it? You're abandoning us. No, I said, steady. I'm choosing not to abandon myself. The line went dead. For a moment, the room echoed, not with grief, but with space. Sometimes the breaking point isn't the moment everything shatters. It's the moment you stop offering yourself as the glue. When I set the phone down, the apartment felt smaller. The walls didn't close in. They just echoed. I leaned against the counter, the cool tile grounding me, and let the quiet sink in. No tears, no shaking, just air moving through my lungs, like it finally knew where to go. Sometimes the breaking point isn't the moment everything shatters. It's the moment you stop offering yourself as the glue. They'd taught me that love meant obligation. But that night, in the calm after their call, I finally rewrote the definition. Love starts when control ends. The week after the call didn't unfold, it dissolved, one muted day after another, like watercolor bleeding off the page. I went through the motions, meetings, blueprints, smiles that didn't quite reach. Every conversation felt like an echo, like I was talking from the bottom of a well I'd already climbed out of. It wasn't guilt that haunted me. It wasn't anger either. It was something quieter, grief maybe, but not for the man in the hospital, for the years we'd both wasted pretending control was love. My father had built his life on authority, over his work, over my mother, over me. But control isn't structure, it's scaffolding. It looks strong until the first crack, and then it collapses under its own weight. Now it had. That Friday, Greta caught me in the hallway at Ardent Systems, eyes sharp but kind. You look like you're carrying something, she said. I'm fine, I lied, the word too small to hold the truth. That night, I stood on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city pulse beneath me. The lights shimmered across the dark water, reflections of a world still moving, even when I stood still. For the first time, I understood distance, the kind that doesn't ache but breathes. I had drifted far from the version of myself that used to beg for their approval, and the space between us wasn't emptiness, it was peace. The following Monday, I went in early. The office glowed, glass walls, sunlight spilling across the floors, no corners dark enough for ghosts to hide in. Our team was finalizing the Portland Sustainability Project, a massive initiative to rebuild the city's water systems. The kind of project I used to dream about when the lab was my whole world and validation was still currency. Greta gathered us in the conference room, her voice steady with purpose. This presentation will define us, she said. If we win this bid, we change Portland's future. Mara, you're leading the reclamation section. I blinked. Me? She smiled slightly. You ran the models. You know this system better than anyone. For a heartbeat, I couldn't find words. Then I nodded quietly. The next few days blurred into spreadsheets and sleepless nights, datasets replacing dreams. Sometimes, just before dawn, I'd hear my father's voice again, that old, ghostly echo, "You owe me." But every time another voice answered back, mine, calm, certain, "I don't anymore." The morning of the presentation, I dressed with precision. Charcoal suit, cream blouse, hair pulled tight. No jewelry except the same silver bracelet I'd worn to the wedding. A private symbol of power that didn't need to be loud. City Hall smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. 7 council members waited behind a long table, their expressions unreadable. Greta began, confident as always. Marcus handled infrastructure specs. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, palms damp but steady, and began. "Good afternoon. I'm Mara Reyes, and I'll be presenting our environmental impact assessment." My voice was level, measured, grounded. I spoke of conservation rates, adaptive systems, resilience through flexibility. When one of the council members challenged the optimism of our data, I didn't flinch. "We designed for reality," I said. "If the numbers shift, the system adapts. It bends. It doesn't break." Heads nodded. One of them smiled. And for the first time, my words carried a different kind of weight. Not borrowed authority, but earned conviction. In that room, under the sterile hum of City Hall lights, I realized I'd built something stronger than control. I'd built stability. While his world was crumbling under the weight of pride, mine was finally standing. Not because I'd escaped his shadow, but because I'd learned how to build in the sunlight. By the time we wrapped the presentation, Greta looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years, respect that didn't come with conditions. A few days later, the council released their decision. We'd won. The office erupted, laughter, applause, relief, all of it spilling through the glass walls like light. Greta pulled me into a hug. "You earned this," she said, and for once I believed her. That evening, a local paper ran a story. Portland chooses Ardent Systems for citywide sustainability project. Below the photo of our team, my name stood alone, lead engineer Mara Reyes. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was simply standing where I belonged. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with a message from Leah. "Mom saw the article. She's proud of you, just wanted you to know." I stared at the screen for a while, the words feeling both heavy and hollow. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The next day, a package arrived at my door. Gold trim, delicate paper, my mother's handwriting. Inside was a framed copy of the article and a note. "We always knew you were capable of great things. We're so proud. Love, Mom and Dad." The frame gleamed in the light, beautiful, precise, empty. Because pride that arrives after silence doesn't heal. It decorates. I set it gently in my closet, closed the door, and went back to my desk where new blueprints waited. For once, my name wasn't a footnote in someone else's story. It was the title on my own. A month later, another message came. This time from my father. Short, measured. "Mara, I'm selling the company." The heart attack was a wake-up call. "Your mother and I are downsizing, starting over. I'd like to meet. Just coffee. No pressure." "Dad, I read it 3 times before replying. I'll meet you, but I can't go back to what we were. If we start again, it has to be honest." That Saturday, I found him at a small cafe called Morning Grounds. The man who once filled rooms with command now sat quietly, a tremor in his hands, humility in his voice. "Thank you for coming," he said. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Then he spoke softly, stripped of the pride that used to sharpen every word. "I pushed you too hard, expected too much. I thought strength was control. It isn't. You deserved better. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the past, but it was real. I don't need an apology to fix it," I said. "I just need the truth." He nodded. "I saw your article. You've built something good. I have," I said. "And I'm still building." We talked for an hour, not as father and daughter chained by expectation, but as two people finally learning how to meet in the middle. When we parted, something in his face had softened. Maybe something in mine had too. Leah stopped calling, but sometimes I'd see her name flash by, proof that healing doesn't always mean reunion. When he reached for his coffee, his hand trembled. The same hand that once held my future like a leash. I didn't flinch this time. Some debts you don't repay with money, but with distance. And I'd already paid in full. The rain didn't fall that evening. It lingered, suspended between sky and earth, like the pause between two breaths. I walked home through that stillness, the city humming quietly beneath its own heartbeat. For the first time, the weight I carried wasn't memory, it was possibility. Every step away from what I'd been taught felt like a blueprint traced by my own hand. Imperfect, but mine. Some people inherit legacies, others have to demolish them first. I didn't win, I didn't lose, I just stopped playing a game that was never meant for me. And in that quiet refusal, I found something sharper than vengeance, freedom. And somewhere beyond the skyline, where the storm hasn't decided if it will break or pass, I know another story is waiting, already turning toward the light. As I reached the corner, the rain finally began. Soft, uncertain, like the city exhaling. I didn't hurry, I just walked. If you've ever learned peace the hard way, you'll understand what comes next.